There is a prayer you have been praying for years with a sincere heart and clean motives, and God has been saying no, not because He did not hear you, not because you lacked faith, but because you lacked faith, but because He loves you too much to give you what you ask for today. I want to show you something that will change the way you pray for the rest of your life, because some of the most dangerous prayers in the world are the ones that feel the most righteous, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly which ones you have been praying. James 4:3 says, "When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures." Notice something. It does not say you did not ask enough. It does not say you did not ask enough. It does not say you did not believe enough. It says the asking itself was corrupted, and the person praying had no idea. Not every prayer that comes from a good heart comes from a surrendered one. Not every request that sounds holy is a request God can honor. We are going to identify 5 prayers that feel completely right and are quietly working against the very life God is building for you. Prayer 1, Lord, make this pain go away. This is the prayer that asks God to remove the very thing He is using to save you. I want to be very careful here because I am not talking about crying out to God in suffering. Scripture is full of that. David did it. Jesus did it in the garden. God is not offended by your pain. I am talking about something more specific, the prayer that demands the exit before the lesson, the prayer that treats every difficult season as an enemy to be defeated rather than a hand to be trusted. I remember a man in a small group I attended years ago. He had lost his business, and every week he prayed the same prayer, Lord, take this away from me. Take it away right now. And I understood him completely. His pain was real. But I noticed something over those months. He never once asked God what he was supposed to see. He never asked what he was supposed to become. He only ever asked for the door out, and it took him almost 2 years to admit what he later told me himself, that the collapse of that business was the only thing that ever brought him to his knees, that every prayer he prayed asking God to remove it was, without him realizing it, a prayer asking God to leave him exactly as he was. Romans 5:3-4 says, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope." Notice the word produces. Suffering is not a malfunction in your life. It is a factory, and when you beg God to shut down the factory before it finishes its work, you are asking Him to hand you back an unfinished version of yourself and call it an answered prayer. Do not ask God to remove what He sent to refine you. Ask Him what He is building. A prayer that only asks for the pain to stop is a prayer asking God to abandon the work He began in you. Prayer 2, Lord, change them. This is the prayer that keeps you standing in the one place God never asked you to stand. Every believer has prayed this. The unfaithful spouse, the distant child, the friend who wounded you and never apologized, and so you take it to God night after night, year after year. Change them, soften them, fix them. But listen to me very carefully. There is an enormous difference between interceding for someone and appointing yourself as the manager of their repentance. I knew a woman who prayed for a family member for more than 15 years, and her prayer never changed, not once. Change him, Lord. Make him see. Make him different. And in all those years, I never heard her ask God to change one thing in her. Not her bitterness, not her resentment, not the quiet superiority that had grown in her heart while she waited for a man she had already convicted. She was praying for his transformation and had stopped submitting to her own. Matthew 7:5 says, "You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." Notice the order first, not eventually, not after they change. First, Jesus does not forbid you from caring about someone else. As sin, He simply refuses to let you use it as a hiding place from your own. The prayer "change them" can be one of the most spiritually comfortable prayers a person ever prays, because every second you spend on their sin is a second you are not spending on yours. A prayer aimed entirely at someone else. As heart is a mirror you have turned around so you never have to look into it. Prayer 3, Lord, give me what He has. This is the prayer that dresses envy in the clothing of faith. This one is difficult to see, Because it hides inside something that sounds like belief. You watch God bless someone, their marriage heals, their prayer gets answered while yours stays silent, and you tell yourself you are simply believing God for the same thing. You call it faith, you call it standing on His promises, but somewhere underneath that prayer, a question has begun to grow, and the question is not, "Lord, what do you have for me?" I remember watching a man in a church I attended for years. He was gifted and sincere, but every time another man was given a platform, you could see something shift behind his eyes, and his prayers began to change. They were no longer about serving God. They were about matching someone. He was not asking God to use him. He was asking God to promote him to the height of the man he was quietly measuring himself against. And the tragedy is that God had already given that man a calling. It simply did not look like the one he wanted. Galatians 6-4 says, each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. Notice the words without comparing. Comparison is not a small sin. It is a redirection of your entire spiritual life. The moment you begin praying for someone else as portion, you stop asking God for your own. If this message is already naming a prayer you have prayed this week, brother, sister, please subscribe to this channel and write in the comments, "Lord, teach me to pray your will and not my own." Now, let us continue because the next two prayers are the ones almost no believer recognizes. Prayer 4, Lord, use me however you want, but not that. This is the prayer of surrender with a signature withheld. This is the most subtle prayer on this list because it sounds like total obedience. It sounds like a servant, a heart. But listen carefully to what is actually being spoken. Send me anywhere except there. Use me for anything except that. Take everything except this one thing I have quietly decided you may not touch. I once watched a young believer pray one of the most moving prayers of surrender I had ever heard. He offered God his career, his future, his plans, his comfort, and afterwards someone gently asked him about one relationship in his life that everyone could see was pulling him away from God. His entire posture changed, his voice hardened. That is not up for discussion. He had offered God everything on a public altar while holding one thing behind his back. Genesis 22:2 records God speaking to Abraham, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there." Notice which one God asked for. Not the livestock, not the land. Not the servants, the one thing Abraham could not imagine surrendering. God does not want the parts of your life you were already willing to give. He asks for the one you were hoping he would never mention. A surrender with an exception written into it is not a surrender. It is a contract, and God has never once signed one. Prayer 5, Lord, do it now. This is the prayer that demands God. S blessing while rejecting God. S timing. This one is the hardest to release because everything inside you feels justified. You have waited. You have been faithful. You have watched others receive what you asked for, and you are tired. And so the prayer changes. It stops being a request and becomes a demand with a deadline attached. But a prayer with a deadline is not faith. It is impatience holding a Bible. I think of Abraham and Sarah. God had promised them a son. The promise was real. Their desire was not sinful. But the waiting became unbearable, and so they took the promise into their own hands and produced Ishmael, and the consequences of that single act of impatience have echoed across thousands of years. God was not late, they were early, and what they built while waiting became a wound that never fully closed. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles." It carries the meaning of waiting, of expecting, of remaining. The strength is not given to those who arrive. It is given to those who wait. When you tell God to do it now, you are not asking him for a blessing. You are asking him to release something before it is finished, and an unfinished blessing has destroyed more lives than an unanswered prayer ever has. A prayer that dictates the hour is not trusting God with the outcome. It is handing him a schedule and calling it worship. I want to say something important before we close, and I need you to hear it clearly. This message is not about becoming afraid to pray. God is not standing over your prayers with a red pen, waiting to disqualify you for a poorly chosen word. He knows your heart. He knows your pain. He knows most of these prayers were prayed in desperation, not rebellion, and he has never once turned away a sincere heart. But there is a difference between a prayer that surrenders and a prayer that instructs, between asking God to move and telling God how, when, and on whose behalf. James 4:3 told us at the beginning that we ask and do not receive because we ask with wrong motives. And the sobering truth is that a wrong motive can live inside a right prayer, spoken by a right person, with tears in their eyes. So do not stop praying. Pray more. But pray with open hands instead of clenched ones. Pray your will before you pray my request. Pray for eyes to see what God is building, not a schedule for when he must finish it, because the goal of prayer was never to get God to agree with you. The goal of prayer is to be changed by the God you are speaking to. If this message has revealed something to you today, I want you to do one thing right now. Write in the comments, Lord, I release my prayers into your hands. That is a simple sentence, but it is a powerful surrender, and God hears every word of it. And if you know someone who has been praying one of these prayers for years, share this video with them today. It could be the word that finally changes the way they come before God. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel so we can keep growing together in biblical wisdom every single week. God bless you deeply, my brother, my sister.